Hi, boys and girls. Today I'm going to read you the story that begins special training at the palace, Daniel and his friends. That's the story we're going to read today. But I need to give you a little background because the last time I talked to you, we left with the prophet Elijah, and he was standing up against the prophets of Baal, and he was saying that the true and the living God is the real God, and God sent the fire down to consume all of the wood and the sacrifice that was there. Since that time, there's been a lot of time. If we had a timeline and we could look at it, lots of time has gone by since that story and the story we're going to tell that we're going to hear today. During that time, the kings of the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Israel were very, very faithless. They didn't follow, they didn't listen and obey God. And because of that, God allowed some of the evil kingdoms that were around Israel to come and to capture and hurt the Israel people. And some of the kingdoms that came were kingdoms like the Assyrians. Here's a picture of what people think maybe the Assyrians looked like. Pretty fierce warriors. And then later, the Babylonians came. They came and they broke into the city and they hurt the people and they broke down the walls and they took all the beautiful things that were in God's temple. Here's a picture of the king of Israel's at the time trying to escape. And he was disobeying God by doing this, by escaping and leaving all his people to deal with the soldiers. And some of the Babylonian soldiers saw him escaping and they arrested the king. And that's where we kick up the story. So we've got Babylonian soldiers coming into the city of Jerusalem, and that's the main city in Israel, and they are breaking things down and burning the temple, and they're able to do these things because God has allowed the Babylonians to have the power to do that because the people weren't listening and obeying him. So we're going to start on story 202, special training at the palace. Here we go. So Nebuchadnezzar is the name of the Babylonian king who is coming and taking over Jerusalem. When Nebuchadnezzar first marched into Jerusalem, he arrested the king and his court and took them back to Babylon. Okay, so he arrested the Israel king. He told his chief official, Ashpenaz, to pick out all of the young people who could be trained to become advisors in the Babylonian court. So he's going around and finding the faithful Israel men who he wants to train up to become more like the Babylonians. Now, Babylonians don't love the true God, and they live far away, and so this was kind of a strange thing to do. Ashpenaz searched for teenagers who were healthy, good-looking, and at the top of their class at school. He ordered them to be ready to set off for the court of King Nebuchadnezzar far, far away. One of the chosen young people was Daniel. He was glad that 3 of his best friends had been picked too. Once they arrived in Babylon, Ashpenaz explained to them what would happen to them. The Babylonians were not cruel like the Assyrians, and the captives, this was Daniel and his friends, were treated well. First of all, Ashpenaz himself would teach them to read and write in the Babylonian language. Then they would begin a 3-year university studying philosophy and literature and astrology and the Babylonian religion. So Daniel and his friends are getting like as if they get to go to college. They're going to college in a whole different country, learning all their languages, all of their ways, all of their studies. They're studying the stars there. Once they had qualified, they would be allowed to be advisors at the king's court. You will live well, Ashpenaz told them. You are to have the same choice food and the same best wine that is served to the king himself. Although Daniel and his friends were far from God's temple in Jerusalem, they were determined to be loyal and true to the God who made heaven and earth. They did not want to live a life of easy things and beautiful things and luxury if if their family and friends were not, accepting special treatment for the king and making themselves the king's chosen people instead of God's chosen people. They decided to ask for a more simple way of life. "Please," said Daniel and his friends, "thank you for the fancy food, but we would like to ask for just vegetables and water." Daniel asked Ashpenaz, "We do not want your royal food." "I dare not do that," said Ashpenaz. "If you look pale and like you are weak and don't have enough food, I will be blamed." When Ashpenaz had gone, Daniel repeated his request to the guard who was in charge of them. "Please, let us give it a try," he begged. "Give us just plain vegetables to eat and water to drink for 10 days. Then see how we are compared to the other students." The guard agreed. He would be able to enjoy all the special food that was set aside for Daniel and his friends. So the guards ate the treats. After 10 days, the guard examined the 4 men closely, and he had to admit that they looked healthier and more full of energy than any of the other young people. So for the 3 years that they were students there in Babylon, the 4 Jewish boys kept to their simple diet and stayed loyal to God and to their own people who were far away. So this is the story of the beginning of story of Daniel getting taken as a captive to a faraway place. And then when he got there, he was treated very almost strangely well. They were saying, "Let's fatten you up with all these treats and sweets." And he said, "No, thank you. We'll learn what you want us to learn, but give us vegetables and water." And the guard said, "Well, I don't know if I can do that, because what if you get sick?" And he says, "No, God will take care of us. And we want to stay faithful to what God has called us to do." Now, I want you to think, what other story have we heard from that somebody was taken from far away to a new place, and then when he got there, he was exalted and made to be in charge? Can you think of a man that did that we've already learned about? I'll give you a hint. His story had something to do with 7 fat cows. Who was that guy? I want you to think about that. Think if you can remember who it was, and maybe you can tell your mom or dad or brother or sister who that guy was, where he came from, and where he was going. His name was Joseph, of course. And I want you to tell me the story of what you remember of the story of Joseph. And then I want you to think about this part of the story of Daniel. And I want you to tell me, how are they same and how are they not same? They're interesting. Okay, and then we'll go on to the next story that comes after this. Okay, boys and girls, remember to thank God out loud every day. Bye.